Hi, and welcome to another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. We're doing a series of interviews with the featured speakers at the upcoming Parental Alienation Conference taking place in New York City the first weekend of October 2nd and 3rd. The conference is titled Parental Alienation Syndrome, Past, Present, and Future, and it's specifically geared towards mental health and family law professionals, but is also open to the general public and would be very beneficial to anyone currently dealing with parental alienation. As a bonus to DadsDivorce.com readers, the first 20 people who email me at info@DadsDivorce.com will receive the $195 ticket for free, and then after those 20 have been taken, you can still receive discounted tickets just by emailing me at info@DadsDivorce.com. For more information on the actual conference, which is called the Canadian Symposium for Parental Alienation Syndrome, even though it will be taking place in New York City, you can find out more information at the website www.cspas.ca. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Amy Baker. Amy's speech will be the introductory speech on the first night, and will focus on her research findings of adult children of parental alienation. So Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First off, if we could just sort of give a general overview of what exactly is parental alienation and why is it so harmful to children?
Sure. Well, there's two terms that are related, but I'm going to make a distinction between them. One is parental alienation strategies. The other is parental alienation syndrome. Parental alienation strategies are a set of behaviors and attitudes that one parent exhibits which are designed to create a psychological breach between the child and the other parent. Now, not every child who's exposed to these strategies actually rejects the other parent. And so when a child does adopt false beliefs and unrealistic negative attitudes towards the other targeted parent and eventually rejects that parent, we say that that child has a parental alienation syndrome.
Okay, and what are some of the strategies you mentioned that a parent can use to manipulate a child to reject the targeted parent?
Well, in my research, I identified 17 primary strategies, and I did this through two sets of studies. One was a study of adults who had this experience when they were children. That is, they said, yes, when I was a child, one of my parents manipulated me to turn me against the other parent. And, of course, they had the realization that that's what happened so that they could then reflect on it. And then I also did a series of studies with parents who were going through this now, and I asked them, what are some of the things the other parent of your child is doing that you think are turning your child against you? So from this combined set of studies, I identified 17 primary strategies, including the obvious bad-mouthing or denigrating the other parent. This is the most common. Everybody knows that this is part of what parental alienation is when one of the parents exaggerates existing flaws, manufactures flaws that are not there,
Right.
and basically creates the impression that the other parent is unloving, unavailable, unworthy, doesn't love the other child.
What are maybe the least obvious, strategies used that you may not even realize it's being used against you as the targeted parent?
Right. Changing the child's name. People are often surprised that that's on the list, but it's one of the things that alienating parents tend to do. So mothers do this by using their maiden name instead of the dad's last name. And dads do this by making up a new nickname for the child,
Sure.
or if there's a hyphenated last name, only using their portion of the hyphenated last name. And, it's very interesting. People don't realize that this is all part of it. But the way that I explain it is I ask an audience, if I'm giving a lecture, what is the first thing that a cult leader does when a new member joins the cult? Change the person's name. Why? Because it's a way of saying, I own you. And it's also a way of saying your life as this new person with this new name begins now. And that other person with that other name who used to have a relationship with the other parent, that kid is gone. And now you are this new person.
Right. That's very interesting. You mentioned you did research on children people who were alienated as a child and then now as adults. What were some of the symptoms of adults that were part of a parental alienation battle?
Well, I asked them, what did this do to you? What do you think the impact of this experience was? And not surprisingly, they're the same kinds of negative long-term outcomes that are associated with being in a cult. In other words, if somebody enters a cult at 18 and they come out at 28, they're not your average 28-year-old. They don't have any life skills because their whole development has been stunted. They don't know how to think for themselves because they've been continually told, that they are not smart enough and that the cult leader knows them better than they know themselves and they need the cult leader to think and figure things out. Well, kids who have been so enmeshed with one parent that they're, willing to cut off the other parent, those kids have a lot of the same, long-term outcomes. They're depressed because they've been sort of encouraged to think that they're helpless and hopeless and that the other parent doesn't love them. They have low self-esteem. They have difficulties trusting anybody once they figure out what happened, and if they've been manipulated, they feel like, oh my God, it happened to me once, it could happen again. And the saddest part of all this was a total surprise to me was what I now call the intergenerational transmission of parental alienation syndrome, which is half the people I interviewed who had kids had already lost their own kids.
Oh, so it sort of trickles down.
Well, what happens is, and I'll just give you a prototype, a young boy who has a narcissistic mother who turns him against his father, and this isn't the only pattern, but this is just one. Who does that boy grow up to marry? A narcissistic woman like his mother, unless he's been in therapy and had a whole realization about what happened. So then if he marries a narcissistic woman who eventually, if that marriage, ends in divorce and there's kids, what is that woman going to do? Well, it's very likely she's going to turn the kids against him.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've developed a program called I Don't Want to Choose for kids. Could you talk a little bit about that and explain what it is?
Sure. There's three parties to any alienation triangle. There's the favored parent, the rejected parent, and the child. Now, the favored parent, I believe, in severe cases, these parents have personality disorders, and it's pretty much useless to try to change them. There's really not much you can do psychotherapeutically to get them to change their behavior. So I've really focused all of my efforts on trying to empower and educate the other two players, the targeted parent, and I have resources for them, and now I've developed a new set of resources for all kids of divorce, because the belief is that all kids, even if it's not a parental alienation dynamic yet, all kids in divorce experience loyalty conflicts. And the parental alienation strategies, you can also just think of them as your normal divorce situation, which is likely to create a loyalty conflict in a child. One parent asking the child to spy on the other parent, one parent asking the child to keep secrets from the parent. All those kinds of things create in children a conflict. And so I've created a program that consists of a book for children that they can either read themselves or have the parent read to them or a therapist read to them, a workbook that they can work on their own that's filled with hopefully fun activities that the kids can do, scavenger hunts and word searches, but all related to the content of the book. And now I have a manual that school social workers or teachers can use to run an I Don't Want to Choose group program in the school. And the point of the program is to teach kids critical thinking skills, which they need anyway. They need to learn how to think for themselves so they don't use, drugs, and they can resist peer pressure, and they don't drop out of school, and they don't join gangs. And this is good stuff for all kids. But the context of teaching kids critical thinking skills, and I Don't Want to Choose, is how to use critical thinking skills to resist the pressure to choose one parent and lose the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly sounds beneficial. And again, to the viewers and listeners out there, if you email me at info@dadsdivorce.com, the first 20 people will receive a free ticket to the event. And then after those are gone, again, discounted tickets are available. So, Amy, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, that was Dr. Amy Baker, one of the featured speakers at the upcoming Parental Alienation Conference happening October 2nd and 3rd in New York City. That'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. We'll see you next time.